Welcome to a podcast. Total Survey Design.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Total Survey Design podcast. My name is Sanyap Lee.
And I'm Azdran Soma. In this episode, we will talk about why people might distrust surveys and some ideas on how to restore trust. In this episode, we are going to introduce a new segment that we plan on implementing at the beginning of each episode, a free talk segment where we discuss something that we want to talk about or things that might have caught our attention, things that probably might work as episodes on their own, but that we just thought we might talk about them in brief, unscripted discussions before getting into each lecture. In today's free talk segment, I want to talk about Sanyap's new job.
Whoa.
So first I want to say congratulations, Sanyap.
Thank you.
You just got a new job at Kansas State University. You'll be living in Manhattan, not the big one, but the one in Kansas.
Probably the better one. I don't know.
I mean, I'm looking forward to visiting you already. So, tell us about this job.
So I'm really happy. First off, thank you for congratulating me. And yeah, so basically, this is a position at the Institutional Research Department at Kansas State. And their team's expanding and they're looking for someone to be the survey person, right? So when I first learned about this job, sounds just like me. And it was really interesting because, just from the interview process, the team members seemed very enthusiastic about the scope of this job and what they were basically saying, if we're just filling in someone that we needed to do surveys, we wouldn't look for anybody. But we're looking for someone who could be this ambassador for surveys. And yeah, that got me really hooked on.
So what does your new job entail you doing?
Basically be the central person who conducts surveys about the health, the performance of the university in different layers. There are admin, there's faculty members, there's staff members, there's students, and if they're doing well, if they're satisfied, if there's any opinion that they want to bring across to the university admin's attention, I feel like that's the main scope of the work, but also collaborate with different departments, not only academic units, but different admin units, so that I feel like I'll be the person, I hope that I'll be the person that ties all that institutional research from a survey methods perspective.
Hey, I just want to say again, congratulations. This is really exciting. This seems like something right up our alley, and I'm really proud of you. So
I'm really happy, and I feel like I could finally own up to my doctor title and the survey methodologist title.
Yeah, nice. So, congratulations.
Now let's get back to the main part of the episode, which is about why might people distrust surveys. A 2019 report from Pew Research Center suggests that 81% of Americans think the potential risks of data collection by companies about them outweigh the benefits, and 66% say the same about the government data collection about them. And I believe 5 years later, the perception of risk and distrust would perhaps be even greater than it was 5 years ago. So why might this be? Let's kind of talk about this in a very more free-form, open discussion. And the first thing that comes to mind is the survey just itself might be a very sensitive topic. And it reminds me of the survey on pregnant women that while I was working at the telephone center, they were doing about a survey of pregnant women and how they deal with, their pregnancies and whatnot. Actually, I didn't get to actually go over the questionnaire because since it was a sensitive topic, it involved female interviewers only. So it did not only, it kind of facilitated this idea of, since we're asking these questions, we're going to make it a little more comfortable for you to answer these questions. Or what other factors might make people be distrustful or think it's risky to respond to surveys. Speaking of interviewer effects, it reminds me of one funny story. It was about a survey for evaluating an adolescent health program at the state level. And when I called the contact that we were given to, it went into the parent, I believe. And the parents were, why would a grown man want to talk to my teenage daughter? So we had to do all these, follow the protocols. Oh, we're coming from this reputable, institution, and we're not here to talk to your daughter as an individual, but from a more research perspective, as a research, and like we are all like HIPAA compliant and all that. And yeah, she was willing to say, oh, she's not around. Please call us back in like a couple hours or so. So I guess it's we have to make sure like we constantly communicate this trust, and like me having this male grown up voice kind of pushes away people from responding or even just willing to take the first contact.
So another factor that might decrease trust of surveys is a lack of legitimacy from the surveyor. This is the idea of like appealing to social exchange theory. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is how, there are a lot of surveys out there that, they seem distrustful just by the appearance of it, or the fact that, when they post the survey, they don't provide any contact information, or they don't provide, they don't show like any sort of connection to any reputable sources. Because the truth is, like, if I see a survey that comes from a more trustworthy source, if I see a survey from Gallup, I'm going to be a little bit more trusting in that survey, in that it is a legitimate survey and it's conducted fairly, than if it came from some, random organization with a random domain name. Furthermore, if that researcher, whether it's from Gallup or WSU or another university or another institution, if they provide me with like a contact information, a website where I could get more information, simply saying like, if you have any questions about the survey, even before you start taking the survey, you could contact us at this email or this telephone number, which I know telephone numbers are something that we don't really do anymore. That's an older thing. But, the fact that like if a researcher provides an email, that I could email them, or I could even just like look up who the researcher is, and a real profile comes up at a university or a company, like they're not completely anonymous. It increases the trust in me as a respondent, and it increases the trust in the surveyor themselves.
And like going back to that like legitimacy, and like even going back to the tweet example we came up with, right? It's not only about like how legitimate you are as a researcher, as a pollster or a surveyor, but just being upfront about how we like learned about your contact, right? Like we got your contact from a sampling company, or because we had an email list from this organization, or if it's like from the business, or if from a third party organization that we contracted. Like, oh, they told me like we just have a list of people who didn't respond. We don't know, like we also have no idea of finding out what your answer was, even after you take the survey. So like being just upfront and being more transparent about how we got to contact you is like, I think it's also one factor that a lot of people just overlook.
No, I mean, what I was going to add to that is also, if you have a random sample of addresses, say that like, hey, we pulled a random sample of addresses that we obtained from the USPS, and we wanted to survey all the people in your city, and you're just one of the random addresses that we're serving. So being upfront and being honest is also a way of increasing this level of trust in the surveyor, which, again, I want to remind you that this increases the data quality, it decreases the dropout rate, it increases the response rate,
the completion rate,
and you're going to get better data, and you'll learn more about your population. So
not from only like from an outcomes-based perspective, right? But I think it's just a good ethical practice when you reach out to just human subjects in general. Just state the reason, like, oh, like how did I get your contact? Why are we reaching out? Before just, I think when you're doing research with people as subjects in general, we tend to overlook there are humans after all. So it's just an ethical consideration.
Yeah, no, on the other side of the story, there's this idea that like if we as surveyors do not act ethically, it doesn't just make our jobs more difficult for future surveys provided by us, but it's like that idea of like bad apples that spoil the good surveys in general. So
Yeah, just like having those bad surveys that make people lose hope and interest in surveys like almost eternally. So some of them are just like genuinely poorly designed surveys. Like, what comes to your mind when you think of like, do you have any like examples of surveys that come to your mind that you have actually experienced?
yeah, so like one of the things that actually this reminds me of is how, a lot of surveyors are really bad actually at estimating the amount of time that a survey will take. And so one of the ways to increase trust with a survey is to really be upfront from the very beginning on how long a survey is going to take. If a survey is going to take 8 minutes and, maybe you might be tempted to say, oh no, it's only going to take 5 minutes and, to get people more willing to take the survey, you're going to be decreasing trust in the survey because when 5 minutes are up and people are still not done with the survey, they're going to actually even be more suspicious and more upset with the fact that you weren't honest to begin with. Yeah. Whereas, if you tell somebody, hey, this survey is going to take 8 minutes or 12 minutes or however long it's going to take, you're actually increasing trust.
Like some surveys just feel like a one-off event that don't seem to make like any actual changes. Like some people, like from the respondent's perspective, like it makes the respondents think like, what's in it for me? Like, let's say the corporate sent you a survey like last year, and like this year they're doing it like an annual event, but you haven't actually seen any visible, tangible changes ever since the survey was taken last year. So it's not only about the surveyor's responsibility, but people who take that information from the data that's collected, and are you actually doing something from the data that's collected? So I feel like it's more than just, are you doing a good survey? Are you doing an honest and ethical survey? But from that data that's collected, are you actually sincerely taking it to fix the situation or take the insights into, actual action?
Also, to go along with the idea of increasing trust with the survey itself, the consent form or information page before a survey begins is a great place to establish trust. And I want to emphasize that it's really important to establish trust by being honest in a survey, because one of the things that I saw recently, for example, on the Prolific subreddit, is there was a user posting a warning to other respondents or other users of the subreddit saying, hey, be cautious when you take this survey because there's graphic and gory content. And in the information page on Prolific, when they posted the survey, they didn't make it clear that there was very graphic and gory content. They said that yes, there's like some explicit material, but I think it's really important to emphasize, if you're going to show graphic content in your survey, make it clear, because you don't want somebody to drop out then like halfway through. That's a form of dishonesty and also increasing distrust.
Fundamentally speaking, in many cases, I would say people who distrust surveys, it just stays as distrust, right? Like people might be willing to take your survey, but at the back of their head, a part of their themselves would think, like this, what if this is like, a scam, or what if this is just there to steal my information? But they would still complete it to a certain extent. But some just genuinely lead to refusals, so they're just lost data points. And some of them are just, they might respond, but in a very equally dishonest way because, this surveyor seems sketchy, so I'm not giving my like full honest information. So it just establishing trust in the first place, and helping people get rid of that shadow of distrust is really important, even in the longer run. So how could we ourselves parse out help people parse out legitimate real surveys from potentially the fake ones or the bad ones?
Well, I mean, first I would say, does a survey make logical sense? Is the survey attempting to achieve what they set out to achieve? So even thinking about the title of the survey, do the questions even relate to the goal that is stated in the title? Like if it's a goal about saying, hey, we want your opinion on certain legislation, right? and then they start asking you about something like unrelated. I mean, very unrelated, because sometimes we can't really tell if it's related or not. But, if it makes logical sense, if the survey doesn't make sense, I would say I would be more cautious, right? And then another thing is if the survey starts asking, let's say, too much personal information,
Very intrusive ones.
yeah, very intrusive questions, it begins raising the doubt in my mind about the legitimacy of the survey. Another fact that lives rent-free in my head is this idea that by just collecting 3 data points, which is the birthday of an individual, the gender, and their zip code, you could essentially pinpoint with the 50% accuracy the actual individual that you're surveying. There's been several times that I've come across a survey where they actually ask you the zip code that you live in, your birthday, your exact birthday, and your gender. I become very suspicious because I'm like, hey, they have enough data to pretty much know who I actually am, the person.
Yeah, put a finger on you, who you are.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is something that we should remind people who are listening to this and are potentially more likely to be on the respondent side than the the surveyor side of the story is. If sometimes these questions seem a little, shady and you do not want to answer, I feel like most of these surveys have not applicable or refuse to answer, because it's at the end of the day, it's your freedom to answer or not provide an answer. And if the surveyor is really, really adamant on giving them your information about that, then I would be really, really starting to get skeptical towards that survey.
Yeah, I mean, in general, if a survey requires you to answer every single question, from the onset, I would say that it's a poorly designed survey. But especially if they're forcing you to answer intrusive questions, I would say that's
or demographic questions.
Yeah, if they're
I would be on the fence about the demographic, but intrusive questions.
Yeah, and even with demographic questions, here's another thing. If they're asking too precise or too detailed, too much detailed of information, if they're asking for your income by the dollar, I don't know, maybe that would make me feel uncomfortable. But if they're asking income brackets, I might be more likely to respond. And here's the thing, what I would say to you as a respondent, if they're forcing you to answer a question, don't input wrong data, but I would rather suggest either skipping the question, and if you can't skip it, then, just drop out of the study. And I think I would prefer that than to input wrong data, because if a respondent, if it's a question that is a main dependent variable, I would rather you drop out from the study than give me an inaccurate response.
Yeah.
And if it's a poorly designed survey that is forcing a response for every single question, well, I think that's the onus on the designer themselves for designing such a poor survey. So.
And you should also ask the surveyor, it's necessary for them to include that information, but if it's not very visible, you should ask how is my information going to be protected? How is this not not going to take advantage of me, or something along those lines, right? And if they can't provide you an answer, or if they're asking you your health related questions, are you HIPAA certified? And if they're not, I would walk away from that kind of survey.
What does HIPAA certified mean?
It's a Health Insurance and the Personal Information Act, basically Health something Portability Act, meaning you cannot disclose sensitive information about your health status.
So is that something that surveyors are required to fill out or get approval for?
A lot of survey research centers have that kind of compliance certificates, basically.
Is that an IRB, an Institutional Review Board certification?
No, it's external to IRB, but if you are requesting a study through IRB that is that has to be compliant with the HIPAA, you need to, I believe, to my knowledge, off the top of my head, you have to go through another, you have to include another document that you are HIPAA certified.
Well, talking about IRBs,
yeah,
That's another way that we could increase. I mean, that's a very important way to increase trust in a survey. In the introduction to the survey or in the consent form, I think you'll see that a lot of surveys have a reference to them being approved by their institutional review board. And essentially what the goal of institutional review boards is, they ensure that the surveys that they approve do not violate anybody's rights and are not harmful, and essentially do not place the institution in jeopardy of being sued. So if I see that they're IRB approved and they provide, let's say, an IRB approval number on the survey, and I could very easily track down the institution and their IRB contact information, all of a sudden my trust level increases for that survey.
And now that most surveys today are conducted online, it's like it's most likely that they send you the survey invitation through their email. So we probably talked about this a few episodes ago or many times ago about does it come from a reputable source, right? Is the email from a .edu email, or do they actually claim and they actually prove that they are associated with some established organization? It doesn't have to be, if they're not university affiliated, are they with affiliated certain organization? And again, speaking of online surveys, is a link secure? Instead of HTTP, is it HTTPS?
Look at the survey holistically, and at the end of the day, go with your gut instinct to say, does this seem legitimate? Does this seem honest? An honest effort or attempt to collect data?
Don't forget to subscribe.